So here I am on 684 Cadillac again, and I'm going to run the diagnostics to try to figure out why the idle motor circuit isn't right, why I'm getting a code 30 for idle circuit. All right, so code 30 is the idle motor speed control, and it says you need to have the check engine light on with the engine running for this problem. If it's intermittent, don't use this test. So it says that the motor's not controlling idle speed properly. It only controls if the idle switch is closed. And I ran all the switch tests already, so the idle switch must be working correctly. So that sequence was good. ECM monitors the ISC motor, and so it can either be misadjusted, could be misadjusted or defective or wiring defective or... So the best way to test is to verify that the motor retracts and extends when commanded by the ECM. So then they want me to go do the engine output cycling test for a 96. Okay, and do a visual check on it. All right, I want to do the output cycling test with the engine off. I don't need to do the cylinder select test, at least not at the moment. So the book has several choices for how you can get into this test mode. And right now I'm in diagnostics at the 70 at the ready mode. So it says that if I'm there, I ought to be able to push the instant average button and advance it to 95, which it did. So now, once I've got that, looks like from here I should be able to just hit the throttle all the way down and back, and then she'll go into 96, and then I have 2 minutes to go watch the things cycle. So in particular, you can hear the actuators are all going. They're supposed to go on for 3 seconds and off for 3 seconds. And so this is the throttle kicker. And it ain't kicking. You know, if I take I can feel it. It's trying to actuate. Go. Well, it's like barely moving. It's kicking a little bit, but not much. But that's better than it was doing a few minutes ago. I wonder if it just needs some solvent or some lubricant on the stem. Okay, well, I think the test has ended. I'm getting a little bit better action off of it now. Put a little WD-40 on the stem. I'm going to let it keep cycling here for a few minutes and see how it does. I'm getting a little bit better action off of it now. Put a little WD-40 on the stem. I'm going to let it keep cycling here for a few minutes and see how it does. This is a little bit of a challenge to do, but while it was cycling, I took this connector off of the motor and jumpered pins A and B, which are the bottom ones, which is the switch that tells it it's idle. And then I'm using a test light to ground, and C, which is the second one down here, is going properly. It's flashing for 3 seconds and then going out. D, the one on the top, is hot all the time. Let's see if I can show you that. See, so it's lit up right now all the time. So when I get things cycling here, see, if I hit C, it flashes nicely. If I hit D, it's staying on solid. It's not pulsing at all. So either there's a short in the wiring harness, or there's something wrong with the ECM would be my guess. So the motor itself may be fine. It was just trying to extend and then continue to extend and continue to extend, and it was never retracting. And perhaps that's why. So, all right. Well, that's all I can do today. I'll have to trace down. It probably means pulling out the ECM and checking the power at the terminals. And I don't have time for that tonight. That'll be for probably a future episode. So here's what I'm up to on this motor and why I just tested the way I did. This first page is out of the service manual, is the diagnostic for a code 30 for the idle speed control motor. And on top you'll see the circuit that you have to run. And the bottom are the instructions for how to test. Then we go over to the trouble tree for the idle speed control motor. And if you go down, I did the I didn't check the TPS adjustment, but I did perform the switch test number 1. I've cleared codes on. I've done number 2, which is to run the cycling test to see that that it tries to extend but doesn't try to retract, which takes me down the very left-hand branch that says not okay. And you check the throttle, you disconnect the motor. While it's output cycling, you jumper A and B together, and then use a test light between pin D and ground. And the interesting thing about this trouble tree is that it has 2 choices here. So if you test pin D, it's either no light or the light flashes for 3 seconds. There isn't one that says, hey, there's a light, it's on all the time and it doesn't go out. So they apparently didn't think about that, and that causes I'm going to have to make some judgments on my own. So the way this looks is, if we go back to the wiring diagram, what they have you do is put together pins A and B, which is basically the pink wire called throttle switch to ground, and then C and D. C is idle speed drive low, and then there's an idle speed driver high. And so D is high and C is low. And what they're trying to do is get you to do C to ground and see if you get a light, and I do, and it flashes. And they're trying to get you to look at D, the high side, and see if it gets power and flashes. And it doesn't flash, it's on solid. So if you look at that circuit, what it seems to me to be telling me is that, now if I believe the way it's drawn, it looks like they have a driver that cycles, maybe changes polarity and goes back and forth. So either you put power on the low side or you put power on the high side. It's also possible that that it's really not wired that way, and that that C goes through the motor to ground and D goes through the motor to ground through a separate winding. But I think what it's trying to do is signal the motor in two different methods. So if idle speed high is stuck, I'll call it, you kind of have two choices. Either there's a short in that wire for 425, or somehow we're getting 12 volts, or some, 5 to 12, somewhere in there. You're getting enough to light up the light bulb on that circuit because there's a short into the wire at one of these connectors, or the driver circuit in the ECM has died. It's usually some kind of a transistor circuit, and it's putting power on D full time all the time. And since we were testing with the connector disconnected, then the two circuits shouldn't be able to interact. In other words, I'm testing C independent from testing D, and it kind of looks like the driver for pin D has a problem. So the next time I get a chance to work on the car, I'm going to pull down the ECM so that I can test that circuit 425 all the way back at the ECM, and also check for resistance and shorts to it. If I find that the ECM is bad and that driver circuit is bad, I also need to look at the idle control motor. I don't have a spec on it, but it is possible that the motor has a problem and has caused the ECM to die. And on my Camaro, there's a spec in the manual, and I've seen this in other manuals, is basically that all the coils and solenoids and so forth that a driver is running, an ECM driver is controlling, should be at least 20 ohms or more, or you can draw too much power off that driver and kill it by overloading it. So I'm not sure what the right test is on that motor, but again, I'll have to take a hard look at that if it does prove that the ECM is bad. So my guess is that I'm going to end up replacing the ECM, but I've made such guesses before and been surprised, so I'm not going to guess on that. The last thing is just a note that in order to run this test, I have to have that throttle switch jumpered. Basically, you got to jumper that A and B together, or take, pin B to ground, because the idle speed motor won't enable until the throttle switch is closed. So that's what I'm up to, and that's all for now.